Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to give my thoughts on the series premiere of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Now, when I first heard that the series was being made, I wasn't necessarily interested right away. When I saw the first trailers, I thought, wow, it looks really gorgeous. And it looked like it could be a good show, so I thought maybe I'd check it out. I was never a diehard Lord of the Rings fan. I did enjoy the Peter Jackson films very much. I played at least one Lord of the Rings video game on Xbox that I enjoyed. I did read a couple of the books when I was a kid, but not all of them, not more than two of them, not more than one and a half of them. So I wasn't chopping at the bit to watch this, but I thought I might watch it. But after many months of listening to people hate all over this thing for various reasons, most of those reasons stemming from changes made for the show that are departures from what Tolkien set down on paper. For example, elves of color, which apparently there isn't a case for the existence of in the books, or at least not in the areas of Middle Earth where the story's supposed to take place. Another example being that the female dwarves aren't going to have beards, even though according to the lore they're supposed to. Different things like that. Because so many people were convinced that this was going to be utter trash and they were destroying Tolkien's, legacy or trashing his work by making the show the way they were making it, and people wanting it so badly to fail because of that and just hating on it. I said, there's no way I'm not watching this thing when it comes out. I have to watch this thing to see whether it's any good. The thing is that I can't make that determination in any way based on how it is or isn't a departure from the works of Tolkien, because I'm not familiar enough with those works to say. To the extent that I am familiar with it, it's just from the Peter Jackson movies, and I don't remember those terribly, terribly well, enough to get into the minutia. And I don't know how faithful those were to the books, although I understand that they were pretty faithful. So my take on this show is going to be based purely on whether or not it's a good show in and of itself. So I'm going to give you a breakdown of the episodes along with what I thought of the episodes in terms of whether it was good or not. And it's going to be based purely on the show standing on its own merits. I'm probably not going to cover the rest of the season because there's a lot of shows that I'm already covering and a lot of other things that I'm covering. So what's more likely is that at the end of the season, I'll come back and do like a season review. But I wanted to cover at least the premiere and get my thoughts on record about that. So here we are. The premiere was a 2-episode premiere, and the first of the 2 episodes was called Shadow of the Past. And as it begins, we see young Galadriel making a paper dragon boat, which some kids sink on her in the river where she's floating it, after which her brother has a sort of philosophical talk with her. Then she talks in voiceover about how Morgoth destroyed her homeland's very light, causing them to leave their land and go to Middle Earth, where war raged for a century or centuries, causing great loss of life and the spread of the orcs to every corner of the world, doing the bidding of Sauron, whom Galadriel's brother vowed to hunt and kill, only to fail and be killed by Sauron, who marked him with an unknown symbol. Galadriel then takes up his oath and seeks to destroy Sauron, but after centuries has not managed to, and most elves have forgotten what is now the distant past. Still, she searches for him in the frozen north, scrolling giant ice walls and braving cold, dark caves in the process, which at one point leads to a confrontation with a snow troll, which ends up being a short-lived confrontation because Galadriel quite stunningly kicks his ass. Unfortunately, at this point, her loyal troops have had enough and they abandon her because they feel like it's a pointless quest. They're never going to find Sauron. He's probably dead or departed for elsewhere in their view because they haven't heard from him in so long, and so they're putting their lives on the line for nothing. So they say they're not going to back her up anymore. We're then introduced to young Nori of the Harfoots. We're kind of like hobbits, it seems to me, as she's running around the woods, frolicking about. And then we meet Elrond as he is visited in the high elf capital by Galadriel, who would seem to be there to seek from the king a new company to help her continue tracking Sauron, which Elrond tries to dissuade her from doing because the king's a little annoyed that she wouldn't adhere to any of his rules that he set down for her as she was seeking Sauron. Back in the woods, Nori, aka Eleanor Brandyfoot, laments the reclusive, sheltered, safe life of the Harfoots. Back in the High Elf capital, the Elf King bestows honors upon Galadriel and her company before announcing that they're basically being shuffled off to the Elf afterlife or Elf heaven. Just like in the end of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Frodo was going to with some elves. But this doesn't seem to sit well with Galadriel, who tells Elrond that she's going to refuse to go because she can't let go of her oath to destroy Sauron and feels that she must continue to try to do so, which Elrond is pretty aghast over, and it causes him to urge her to reconsider. Elsewhere, an elf named Arondir arrives back in a human village that it would seem is his job, along with his fellow elves in his company, to keep watch over after having not been through there in a couple of weeks. And after almost getting in a fight in a bar with a human who apparently doesn't like elves, he visits with a human woman whom he apparently fancies, despite the fact that elves are not supposed to get with humans. When he's told his company is departing the area and is no longer responsible for the village, he goes back to visit the woman and comes just short of vocalizing his feelings for her, which she seems to suspect or hopes that he has. But before he's able to, some kind of farmer shows up asking the woman to look at his cow because apparently she's a healer and the cow is ill. And when Arondir investigates, he discovers that the cow is giving a black sludge in place of milk and decides that he needs to go to the east where the cow had apparently last been grazing. It turns out that Galadriel decided to go to Elf Heaven after all, which apparently both the king and Elrond thought was necessary because they were afraid that her pursuit of Sauron might actually strengthen him inadvertently. It further turns out that the Elf King has commissioned the best elven smith to embark upon a new project, which he wants Elrond to help him with. Meanwhile, Arondir and the woman whose name is apparently Bronwyn reach a spot where there's supposed to be a village, but they find it burnt to the ground. Back in the woods, one of the Harfoot librarians or scientists is uneasy because the sky seems weird to him and weird things seem to be happening outside of the normal way that they usually happen. Shortly after which, some kind of meteor falls from the sky, visible to all of Middle Earth. And at the same time, Galadriel abandons the ship that she was on that was taking her to the Elf Heaven, literally jumping off the boat into the ocean, just as it was about to be like enveloped by this Elf Heaven place that the boat was going to, which it continues to do without her. Additionally, at the same time, some weird weather starts to occur, and voices whispering in the black speech can be heard on the wind in the High Elven capital, just as falling leaves seem to bear a dark mark. Eleanor, aka Nori, finds what appears to be a man in the center of a crashed meteor. So the meteor crashes down, she goes to the crash site, and she finds like an almost naked human looking dude there. And it was really weird. And that's where the first episode ended. The second episode was called Adrift, and it picks up right where the first episode left off with Nori investigating the very large man, much to her friend Poppy's horror. And when she touches him, he briefly wakes up, and as he starts to like try to stand, he seems to at the same time levitate the rocks and whatnot around him and to be causing the fire at the crash site to go out. But then he kind of collapses again and the fire reignites, which was really strange. The ladies then take it upon themselves to put him in a wheelchair and wheel him up the side of a mountain, whilst arguing about whether or not they should even be doing it, only for him to roll back down the hill when they let go of the wheelchair to continue arguing. They manage to catch him and make camp, at which point Nori talks about how she feels as though he landed where he did for a reason and that she is meant to see to him to see to his safety until she knows he's okay. Back in the burnt out village, Arondir and Bronwyn find that a passage has been dug under the village by something, and Arondir takes the tunnel to find out what it was, whilst sending Bronwyn back to warn her people that something dangerous is about and probably headed toward her village. Elrond and the great elf smith, whose name is apparently Celebrimborn, discuss building a tower with a great forge so that they can create things that would transform Middle Earth, but realize that they would need a workforce to do this that would be so large, they're probably going to need to recruit some dwarves to help them. So they seek out the dwarf prince Durin, whom Elrond manages to get an audience with by invoking a right of endurance, which, if he loses to Durin, would cause him to be banned from all dwarven lands forever. Back in the woods, the giant man is up and moving about on all fours when Nori comes upon him and startles him, after which he tries to draw something with his stick in the dirt, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Meanwhile, Galadriel, who's been adrift a while, happens upon some other folks who apparently are also adrift on a little raft, and shortly thereafter, a sea monster happens upon the same raft, tearing it apart as Galadriel swims away, before swimming back to find only one person from the party she had briefly been with to have survived. Elrond gives up after a certain amount of time of trying to beat Durin in the challenge, after which he's escorted to the city exit by Durin, whom he tries to talk to. But Durin is pissed because his friend Elrond has been gone for 20 years without visiting, and in that time missed a lot of important events in Durin's life. When he asks if he can make an apology to Durin's family, Durin takes him home, but doesn't want him to stay long. But he ends up staying long because the wife invites him for dinner. Over dinner, he manages to get Durin to listen to the proposal that he came to make. Back in the open sea, Galadriel and the survivor guy are still adrift when he tells her that it was orcs that destroyed his village, from which apparently he was fleeing on a ship that got destroyed. Bronwyn makes it back to her village and tells everyone that the other village was destroyed, and that whatever it was that was tunneling under there is likely headed for them. In fact, Bronwyn's kid encounters whatever it is when it comes up under the floorboards of their house. Before we can see what it is, we see that Arondir gets grabbed by something down in the tunnels. We then go back to Bronwyn's cabin and we see that the thing that was digging under the ground was a freaking orc, which ends up losing its head in a fight with Bronwyn. Back in the woods, the strange man seems to have a keen interest in the stars when night falls, and Nori thinks she knows how to help him figure out whatever he's trying to figure out. Back in the village, Bronwyn's friends and neighbors and family are all evacuating so as not to be menaced by whatever's coming under the tunnels. And as he's packing his things, we see that Bronwyn's kid is fascinated with a remnant of some type of sword or staff that he went and dug up out of a hiding spot earlier that would seem to have a dark purpose. And when he gets some of his blood on it somehow, it starts to burn, it ignites. But then he quickly puts it away and joins his mother and the rest of the town as they're evacuating. Before the episode ends, we see Galadriel and her new friend finally drift into an area of the ocean where they're discovered by a passing ship. And that's where the episode ends. So, what did I think of these two episodes? I thought they were absolutely brilliant. Every frame is visually stunning. I mean, the VFX on this show are just mind blowing, and they're going to win a ton of awards. It's just fabulous looking. I really like Galadriel. I think she's a very intelligent character who's on a mission and who's very heroic. I think she's great. I like the Nori character as well as the character of Poppy, her friend. I think they're very funny. I like how adventurous they are. I like how curious they are. And I like how sort of sloppy they are in contrast to the high elves who are very, stand up and starched and, very Shakespearean. And that's something that's always been cool about the Lord of the Rings films to me, that you get, a contrast of the different types of people that live in Middle Earth, between the dwarves and the elves and the hobbitses and so forth. So that's continued here. Found it a little confusing that they call her Nori, because Nori is the name of a dwarf from The Hobbit. And so I was a little confused at first, but they call her Nori apparently because it's short for Eleanor. Kind of a weird choice. But anyway, I liked her character and I like her people quite a bit. The librarian scientist character is funny. Durin and the dwarves were very funny, and I like that character and the character of the wife. I'm very intrigued by what exactly the elven smith has up his sleeve in terms of the things he kind of wants to make with this forge. Is that where the rings of power come from? That forge? I don't know. I thought at first that this forge might be the origin of the sword that Aragon ends up wielding, but I don't think that's the case based on the research that I've done into the sword. I think that sword has a different origin, but nonetheless, I'm interested to see what they come up with. Again, is it the rings of power? Is that where they're made? I don't know. But I found the show to be a lot like the Lord of the Rings movies. I thought that it was just as good as those films. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. I like the Arondir character a lot. I think he's very cool. I like the Bronwyn character. I think watching their relationship develop is going to be good. I'm very curious to see who the man from the sky is and what that's all about. Part of me wants to think that it's Gandalf, but I'm sure that can't be correct. So these are all things that we're going to see play out over the course of the season. I think it's off to a great start. Again, it's visually stunning. I think the acting is fantastic. So, based on all of that, I mean, for me, it's a 5 out of 5. Again, I can't say whether it's faithful to the source material to any high degree or any low degree. So I can't judge it based on that at all. So if you're sitting there going, "Oh my God, this was trash," because you're basing it on the source material and its level of fealty to that, I can't argue with you. But aside from that, taken on its own, I thought it was really, really good. And I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the season. As I said, I probably won't review the whole season because I've got so many other shows I'm doing. And also because, my knowledge of Tolkien is so limited that I don't think I could do a detailed review of an entire season justice the way someone who really knows their Tolkien could. So I'm just not even going to try. But again, I did want to sort of review these first couple of episodes as their own thing to sort of get my thoughts on record about what I think of this show after the first 2 episodes as a standalone thing. So that's really it. I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back with more videos soon. Until then, I wish you peace and long life.